This lecture is about mixed methods and some different kinds of studies that you will run across as you are a consumer of research. For mixed methods, I chose a picture of a mixer because a mixer implies that there's a recipe. It's not just a matter of dumping things together or using different kinds, both qualitative and quantitative, just because you feel like it. There really is a method and a reason, and there would be a good underlying need for mixing the types of methods. So please don't think that it's just a free-for-all. In this group of lectures, there are three things that I want you to be able to do. I want you to be able to describe and identify three types of mixed methods designs and the types of research questions that would go with them and the pros and cons of each. And then I want you to be able to describe the basics and recognize what we call evaluation studies. And last of all, the same thing about action research, which you have probably heard of in your educational career. So let's start with mixed methods designs. Mixed methods designs are a combination of qualitative and quantitative methods. And it's not just a matter of putting them together. There are specific advantages and disadvantages. In your textbook, there's a really good chart which lists out all the pros and cons to having these kinds of mixed designs. But I'd like to point out a couple of things. One of the advantages of a mixed method design is that you can address really complex research questions, and by mixing both types of designs, you can get at the why behind why things are happening, or start to get at that, and it can be really valuable. There are some disadvantages though, and the two I'd like to point out is that first of all, it's really difficult to actually write up and report a mixed methods design. Remember that one type of design, when you're working with qualitative data, you are going through and coding and trying to arrive at a hypothesis or a theme or a suggestion. Whereas with quantitative data, you start with a hypothesis and then you're trying to find evidence either for or to refute that hypothesis or support it. So it's very difficult to write up a mixed methods design. The other piece that you need to keep in mind is that mixed methods designs require expertise in both types, and that is quite a stretch for a lot of people. When are mixed methods designs appropriate? They would be appropriate when one method would not be sufficient, when you really need both to be able to explain something. They're also appropriate when you want broad and deep understanding, or if you need to elaborate on the data analysis. You get all these numbers and you can make sense of it, but maybe you need a why and you need to go back in there and interview some people or do some observations, and it makes what you're presenting so much more powerful. Mixed methods are also really, really good when the topic has a very shallow research history, when we don't know much about an area. And you will see more and more doc students who are doing mixed methods dissertations because they're heading into areas of research that really there isn't a lot known about them. There are three types of mixed methods designs, and they're really about the sequence. First of all, when you're doing an explanatory, in other words, you're explaining why something happened, you gather and analyze using quantitative methods, get all your data analyzed, and then you add in the qualitative methods to get more information about about what is found. So for example, I may want to analyze surveys about students' drug use, and I can get a mean, I can get frequencies, I could even get into some regression analysis and look at different factors that influence that. But then it can add to my understanding if I plan to interview some students to better understand why students behave as they do. And the preponderance of my evidence is quantitative. And then I'm using qualitative evidence to explain or enhance my analysis. So this is called explanatory. You start with quantitative and then you support it with some qualitative data. The opposite of that is exploratory. If the study is exploratory in nature, I'm starting with analyzing my qualitative data. I'm coding it, I'm categorizing it, I'm looking for those themes that come out of this kind of work. Then I use quantitative methods to analyze the appropriate data. So for an example, I may conduct interviews and make observations focusing on students who struggle with reading at grade level. So I'm in their classrooms, I'm watching them, I'm doing this rich gathering of data and artifacts. Then I use those and I find themes to determine which variables are important to analyze the data about. So maybe there's some variables that bubble up. And I could then do some quantitative analysis using those variables and how those students struggle with reading. The preponderance of my evidence is qualitative, and I'm simply using quantitative analysis to corroborate my findings and to support them. And then finally, there's a triangulation design, and this is equal. It means that I'm really truly using different methods to provide different types of evidence for my findings. So if I ask students, teachers, and parents about the usefulness of math homework and get roughly the same responses, the evidence has converged on an answer. That's triangulation. So in balanced mixed method studies, qualitative and quantitative methods are used concurrently to converge on an answer or explanation. For example, I may use a scale that measures attitudes towards drug testing programs in high schools, at the same time that I hold focus groups and interviews to ask about how drug testing programs should be used in high schools. Be sure to look through the example of a mixed methods design in your textbook. It's really helpful and very enlightening.